So what are you guys?
We're the Smartwood family!
Hey guys, thanks for coming out to the review. So a couple things, right before you take the exam, I just wanted you to see this if you had a chance. One, because everything we talked about I think procedurally was good. I was a little fishy about the numbers that came up because I double checked the numbers that we got and I think they were off a little bit. Okay, just for that problem number one that we're talking about. But the procedure itself was fine. But do you guys remember that syndrome we talked about? I think that syndrome came into play because I looked at the sequence of the questions, which was, first find the amplitude, then find the phase, etc., etc. The thing is, if you're forced to find the amplitude first before you find the phase, then we kind of have to do that procedure we were talking about. But like you guys mentioned, Gruner doesn't seem to care as long as you get the right answer. So I think, much more mellow way was the way we were first starting out. I think maybe we'll do it one more time, and I think this way will be pretty quick. Okay? So let's try this. So I think we had something like the displacement was this guy. Right? And then I think they give us the parameters for this. So I think this was something like 0.02 equal to A, and we had the conditions. I think this was also at position 0, time 0. So all of that will go away, and we get this equation. Right? That was the first one. Then I think we went over and said we needed more info, but they gave us info, right? They told us that vertical velocity was something like 2 meters per second. Okay. So with that, we would go over here, run it again. So remember we took the derivative, so we took the derivative of this guy, so that's the same from the review. I think it was negative A omega cosine of kx minus omega t plus phi. So this didn't change. All of that stuff was pretty much the same, right? And then we came in and we plugged in the values, right? So this is at time equal to 0, so we had this guy. So on this side, so the time was 0. Position is 0 as well, right? So you remember that from the review? The time was 0 and the position was 0. I don't mean this vertical position, but I meant the horizontal from left to right. Okay, so this guy would collapse to this. That's what we did. We also put in the orientation and said that velocity would be -2. Okay, so now everything looks pretty good. Okay, it's exactly what we got from the review. According to what you guys said about Gruner, he doesn't care how you get the answer as long as you get the right answer and the thinking is solid, right? So why don't we do this? Forget the amplitude, just like, which is kind of silly. I should have noticed that during the review. We could just forget the amplitude and find the phase, because we already set up for the phase anyway, right? We had said that omega happened to be 2 pi over the period. They told you the period was 25, so I think it's 2 pi over 25. Okay, that was our omega. So omega was 2 pi over 25. Okay? Okay. So again, everything looks good. Now we get down to these two equations, so we look at them back to back. We have, in fact, why don't we just do this? Why don't we try to get, why don't we take this guy, put him on the left. That's just reiterating him. Then reiterate that guy over there. So that would be something like negative A omega cosine phi is equal to negative. So we talked about this from the review, right? You have these two equations. We can solve for this. I think, remember, this guy we already know. But the other thing is I want to line them up so I can cancel stuff out. I think we'll multiply by -1. Kill this thing. I think we'll also bring this omega underneath here. Okay? But we know what omega is, so this should really be 2 over 2 pi over 25, which I think is something like 50 over 2 pi. Right? Or, duh. I want to just do that. Okay. So 25 over pi. Okay, so that's not too bad. So we have this set up. So I'm going to clean this up. I'm just going to rewrite this guy as a solid number. 25 over pi. Okay. And you know what to do from here. We divide out. These guys will cancel out. We'll get sine of phi over cosine of phi, which you know is tangent, is going to be 0.025 over 25 over pi. Right? And this we can crunch through a calculator to find phi. So after that, we would know what phi is, right? I don't remember what number we got in the review. So this guy turns out to be 0.0025. That's not so bad. Okay. All right. And since we set up the orientations correctly, right, we had the correct signs here. We had the setup for this position correctly as well, right? I think everything looks good. Okay, so I think we're pretty good on that. The only other thing that's left for us was we did this in reverse order. So technically we're doing part B first. We're getting that phi. Now we're going to backtrack and get the amplitude, but now that's a piece of cake, right? But this turns out to be sine of 0.0025. Okay, so then we just crunch this through the calculator. Okay. And I think this is 0.0025. There we go. And we get something around 8. Okay. So if we did this right, this guy should be around 8. That number seems like it's more on the mark. I think the first time we ran it was just a little bit off. Okay, I think the setup, the computation is totally fine, but for some reason when we crunched the numbers, I don't think we got 8 out of it. Okay. But hopefully that helped. The procedure that we talked about during the review, I still think is good, because no matter what he asks you, it's the same general setup, right? It's just with this one, if we choose to do it in this order, right, then things will just run a little more smoothly.